for a look at what this means. We joined on the line by expert in African security, governance and defense, Professor Thomas Mandrup. A very good evening to you, Professor. Thank you for your time. Welcome.
Good evening, Paul, and good evening to the viewers, and thank you for having me.
You know, as we perhaps start right at the beginning, it's been years of failed ceasefires and broken commitments. What makes this roadmap different from the numerous previous agreements we've seen collapse before?
I think one has to be very optimistic in the way, but it is, of course, it's very fragile, the process. But the new thing here is, of course, that they have moved from talking about verification of the ceasefire agreement to actually deciding to deploy this verification mechanism, as you mentioned in your introduction. Mm-hmm. And I think that MONUSCO will facilitate, the UN mission in Congo will facilitate the actual deployment. And I think that is a big step forward and a very positive step. But of course, there's a lot of issues here which have been remains unresolved.
Yeah, because the first ceasefire monitoring mission, has now started being deployed in Eastern Congo. And as you speak about the importance of being optimistic, what is the significance of the parties having agreed on sequence, steps, and timelines for negotiations? Because, in practical terms, one needs to understand, what this means in terms of a realistic chance of success.
Yeah, I think the good thing is, as you mentioned, that they have agreed on the steps moving forward. The problem is that we've seen that so many times before during the last 25 years or whatever on different occasions. So, but I think the important thing is that we have a peace agreement where the Americans is involved on the sides, the Qataris are there, and the AU negotiating via Togo is trying to put a pressure on the parties to actually find a solution here. But as I mentioned, the problem here is that it's only it's like a step towards some kind of peace agreement. It's not a peace agreement in itself. So it's actually. So, and I think that's important to remember because yes. We still, if you look at the issues that still remain, M23 and its political side, AFC, is still in control of major urban areas like Bukavu, Goma. They have still controlled large sections of the eastern DRC, both in South and North Kivu. And of course, what is going to happen with that? Are we going to see that they relieve power and give back to the Congolese government? It's not very likely at the current stage unless they get some kind of security guarantees. That's the problem here is we've seen that so many times before in history that we've seen that they've been disarmed, they've been integrated into the national army, all these kind of things, and then we have a surface of conflicts again. So there's a lot of steps we still need, but we have to be cautious, optimistic. It's a good start, and the good thing is that they start talking, and that's actually we see the first actual verification on the ground, and I think that's important.
So as they start talking, and you having emphasized that it's a step towards a peace agreement, perhaps we should talk about the elephant in the room here being trust, just trust, because one needs to then get an understanding of what the biggest sticking points are preventing a lasting settlement between Kinshasa and M23.
Yeah, and I think you're just right to the point here. You can argue that's the whole thing about territorial control, the integrity of the Congolese states, and right now M23, and on top of that, a lot of other rebel and insurgent groups are active in East Congo as well. It's not just the M23, but M23 is the biggest one, and that's the problem. Are we going to see them disarm? What kind of security guarantees are going to be given to those? And yes. What are the issues around why M23 started rebellion initially? Are they going to be solved? That's one issue. The next issue is we've seen historically that then they have some kind of peace agreement, and as I mentioned before, then you have an integration into the national army of some of the former rebel forces. We've seen that before. We've seen also that after some time they desert. What kind of political role if AFC, the political side of M23, is they going to play some kind of role? What kind of role should that be? And then you said the elephant in the room. What about Rwanda? Rwanda denies having any involvement there, but all the reports states that Rwanda is directly supporting the M23. So that's you have that kind of denial. Right? So there's no trust there. On the other side, the government has promised on several occasions during the last 20 years to disarm the former genocidaires from 94 in the FDLR, which is a Hutu-led extremist rebel organization in Eastern Congo. They're still active there. They're not a threat to Rwanda, but it's used as an excuse, and that remains unsolved as well. So there's a lot of sticking points here, and then you have the whole issue around access to land, control with land, all these kind of things, which also remains unresolved. So the issues that remains unresolved are numerous. But I said again, the important part is that they have to start talking now, and we see the actual verification on the ground. And the question is then, who is going to put pressure on the parties to actually start talking and try to resolve the issues here?
So as you talk about issues and excuses, how much of this conflict is really about local grievances, and how much perhaps is driven by the broader geopolitical rivalry between the DRC and Rwanda?
I think it's two sides of the same coin, basically. So you can argue that there is local grievances, and we have this whole the discussion of the truth of the yoke. And the truth of the yoke in the Congo is that many Congolese talk about that all the bad things that happen to the Congo always comes from the outside. And the problem is people from the outside are the Kinyarwanda speakers. And that's both the Hutu and the Tutsis. And some of them have been in Congo for the last 150 years. So there's a whole issue around newcomers and being the right. So we have all these kind of local issues about control of land, all these kind of things, who are real Congolese, who are right to be citizens. It's stated in the Congolese constitution, the people that have arrived before 1960 and all that has the right to be Congolese and these kind of things. But there's these issues around locally. And then you're right. And I remember many years ago, I did an interview with the chief operations in the Zimbabwean Defense Force. So that was back in the year 2000, when Zimbabwe had 16,000 troops in the Congo. And I asked him, what are you doing there? And he said, we are there because Congo is a big elephant and is wounded and it lies down. And Rwanda is cutting small pieces of it constantly, so it continues lying down because everyone knows if if the elephant raises up, it will tramp down and control the whole region. So there is this perception that Rwanda is keeping Congo down to secure its own position because it would not like to be dominated by Congo. And that's, of course, a very simplified way of trying to explain some of the dynamics here. There's other dynamics here is that Eastern Congo has historically, for centuries, been very close to Rwanda and East Africa, where, because of the size of the country, rest of the Congo, the western part of the country, of course, has the connections has not been very good. So there's also historical connections here which are important to understand.
And that's an important point, right? Because for civilians in Eastern DRC who have essentially endured years of displacement and violence, what should they realistically expect from this roadmap in the short term?
Yeah, in the short term, one could hopefully expect that the ceasefire agreement will be upheld. And the problem has been then that they signed this agreement of ceasefire agreement a long time ago, and the parties are continue fighting. So if they continue fighting, and the good thing is that we now see an actual verification mechanism on the ground which can maybe go in and document who is breaking this and put pressure on the parties that break this. So we can. Maybe the local population can expect and maybe see some kind of cessation of hostilities for a period of time. And that is the first step to create some kind of environment where you can start talking about a concrete agreement on peace and all these kind of things. But that's the first step. So the actual verification on the ground is extremely important because it documents because right now, M23 is saying that the government is attacking them. On the other turn, the government is saying the same thing of M23. So they're breaking the ceasefire. Now we get people on the ground that actually monitors who is actually doing what and why, and maybe that could be a start in the discussion point on the future roadmap to get some kind of lasting peace in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for giving us that very thorough analysis. Expert in African security governance and defense, Professor Thomas Mandrup.